On my 70th birthday, my son said, "There's nothing to celebrate, this old woman doesn't deserve it," and handed a gift to his mother-in-law. 1 week later, he got an unexpected visit. Subscribe to the channel for more stories like this, and comment the city you're watching from. My name is Judith and I'm 70 years old today. Or at least I was supposed to be celebrating turning 70. Instead, I'm sitting in my small kitchen at 11 p.m., staring at a piece of chocolate cake I bought for myself, wondering how the son I raised with everything I had could look me in the eye and tell a room full of people that I don't deserve to be celebrated. The party was supposed to be simple. Nothing fancy, just family and a few close friends at Thomas's house. My son has done well for himself. He's a successful doctor with a beautiful home in the suburbs, married to Sarah, a woman who's never worked a day in her life, but somehow always manages to look down on everyone around her. When Thomas called me last week to invite me, his voice had that distant tone I've grown accustomed to over the years. "Mom, we're having a small gathering for your birthday. Nothing elaborate, just family." I should have known something was wrong when Sarah answered the door instead of Thomas. She looked me up and down with that familiar expression of barely concealed irritation, like I was an unwelcome guest at my own birthday party. "Oh, Judith, you're here. Not happy birthday or, 'Come in, we're so glad to see you.' Just acknowledgement of my existence. Like I was the mailman delivering an unwanted package. The living room was decorated, but not for me. There were flowers everywhere, expensive arrangements that I later learned were left over from Linda's garden party the week before. Linda is Sarah's mother, a woman who has made it clear from day one that she considers Thomas beneath her daughter, though she tolerates him well enough now that he's financially successful. Thomas barely looked up when I walked in. He was deep in conversation with Linda, showing her something on his phone, both of them laughing like old friends. The sound of their laughter felt like a knife twisting in my chest. When was the last time Thomas had laughed like that with me? "Happy birthday, Mom," he said when he finally noticed me, his voice flat and mechanical. No hug, no warmth. Just obligation fulfilled. The party lasted exactly 2 hours. Most of that time I sat on the edge of the couch, watching my son cater to his mother-in-law while Sarah made passive-aggressive comments about how some people expect too much attention on their birthdays. Linda held court in the center of the room, regaling everyone with stories about her recent cruise to Europe, while I sat there like furniture. Then came the moment that will haunt me forever. Thomas stood up in the middle of the room, holding a beautifully wrapped gift box. My heart lifted for just a moment. Maybe he had planned something special after all. Maybe this coldness was just stress from work, and he was about to show me that deep down he still cared. "I have an announcement to make," Thomas said, his voice carrying across the room. Everyone turned to look at him, including me. I felt a flutter of hope in my chest. He turned toward Linda, not me. "Linda, you've been like a second mother to me. You've shown me what real family support looks like." The words hit me like a physical blow. I felt the air leave my lungs as I watched my son, the boy I had raised alone, the man I had sacrificed everything for, present that beautiful gift to another woman. "This is for you," he said, handing Linda the box. "A small token of appreciation for everything you've done for our family." Linda opened the box with theatrical gasps of delight. Inside was a diamond bracelet that must have cost thousands of dollars. The same son who forgot to get me a gift, who couldn't be bothered to plan anything special for my 70th birthday, had spent a fortune on his mother-in-law. But the worst was yet to come. Someone, I think it was Sarah's sister, asked Thomas about my gift. The room went quiet, and I felt every eye turn toward me. Thomas looked directly at me, and his next words shattered whatever was left of my heart. "We don't have anything to celebrate. This old woman doesn't deserve it." The silence that followed was deafening. I felt like I was drowning in plain sight, surrounded by people who were witnessing my humiliation but doing nothing to stop it. Sarah actually laughed, a sharp, cruel sound that echoed through the room. "Thomas is right," she said, adjusting the diamond earrings I had given her for Christmas last year. "Some people just expect the world to revolve around them." I don't remember leaving. I don't remember saying goodbye or making excuses. The next thing I knew, I was in my car, driving through the dark streets toward my small apartment, tears streaming down my face. Now I'm sitting here with this piece of cake, and all I can think about are the words Thomas spoke. Not just what he said, but how he said it with such conviction, such certainty. Like he genuinely believed that I, the woman who gave up everything for him, deserved nothing. The apartment feels smaller tonight, filled with 40 years of memories that suddenly seem meaningless. Photos of Thomas's graduation, his wedding, holidays we spent together when he was younger. All of it feels like evidence of a relationship that existed only in my imagination. I keep replaying the moment, wondering if I heard him wrong, if maybe there was some context I missed. But no matter how many times I go over it in my mind, the truth remains the same. My son looked at me on my birthday and declared that I don't deserve to be celebrated. The chocolate cake tastes like sawdust. Tomorrow, I'll wake up and try to piece together what's left of my dignity. But tonight, I'm just a 70-year-old woman sitting alone in her kitchen, wondering how the most important relationship in her life became such a source of pain. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I found myself pulling out old photo albums, desperate to understand where everything went wrong. The first picture I see is from Thomas's 8th birthday, just the two of us in our tiny apartment, him blowing out candles on a homemade cake. His father had been dead for 3 years by then, and we were still figuring out how to be a family of two. Michael died when Thomas was 5. A heart attack at 32, no warning, no time to prepare. One day I was a stay-at-home mom married to an accountant. The next I was a widow with a kindergartner and exactly $847 in our checking account. Michael had always planned to get life insurance next month. Next month never came. I remember that first night after the funeral, sitting on Thomas's bed while he slept, wondering how I was going to keep us afloat. The mortgage payment alone was more than I had ever earned in my life. I had dropped out of college when Michael and I got married, spent 5 years being the perfect housewife, and suddenly I was supposed to support both of us. The next morning, I put on the only professional outfit I owned and started knocking on doors. I took 3 jobs within the first month. Mornings at a diner, afternoons cleaning offices, and evenings doing bookkeeping for a small auto repair shop. Thomas spent those early years shuttling between babysitters and after-school programs, eating more peanut butter sandwiches than any child should have to. But I told myself it was temporary. I told myself that if I worked hard enough, saved smart enough, I could give Thomas the life his father would have wanted for him. Every exhausted morning, every aching back, every night I fell asleep at the kitchen table doing bookkeeping, it was all for him. I flipped through more photos and the memories flood back. Thomas at 10, proud in his little league uniform. I had worked double shifts for 2 months to afford the registration fee and equipment. Thomas at 12, grinning next to his first bicycle, a used one I bought from a neighbor and spent 3 evenings fixing up in our building's basement. When Thomas turned 15, he came home from school excited about his biology class. His teacher had told him he had a real aptitude for science, maybe even medicine. That night, lying in bed, I made a decision that would shape the next 20 years of my life. Thomas was going to be a doctor no matter what it cost me. I started working 4 jobs. The diner, the cleaning company, bookkeeping, and weekend shifts at a local grocery store. Thomas never knew about the 4th job. I would drop him off at football practice and race across town to stock shelves for 4 hours, then pick him up like nothing had happened. His junior year of high school, Thomas mentioned that his friend Kevin was taking SAT prep classes. The course cost $800, money I absolutely didn't have. I sold my wedding ring, the only valuable thing I owned, and told Thomas his grandfather had left money for his education. The lie came so easily, born from desperation and love. Thomas scored high enough to get into pre-med at the state university, but even with financial aid, the costs were staggering. Room and board, textbooks, lab fees. I was working 70 hours a week and still coming up short every month. When Thomas called home complaining about having to share a dorm room, I didn't tell him I had moved to a studio apartment to save money. When he mentioned his classmates going on spring break trips, I didn't tell him I was eating ramen noodles for dinner so I could send him spending money. Medical school was even worse. The tuition alone was more than I made in 6 months. I took out loans, putting my tiny apartment up as collateral. When that wasn't enough, I started selling things, my mother's china, the living room furniture, anything with any value. Thomas never asked how I was managing to support him. He just accepted it as his due. Looking at these photos now, I can see the progression. In the early pictures, I look tired but hopeful. By the time Thomas graduated medical school, I look hollow, worn down, like someone who had poured every ounce of herself into someone else and had nothing left. Thomas's residency years were the hardest. He was making barely minimum wage working 100-hour weeks, so I continued supporting him. By then, I was in my 60s still working multiple jobs, my body screaming in protest every morning. When Thomas met Sarah during his final year of residency, I was relieved. Finally, someone else to help carry the load. But Sarah had different ideas about who Thomas should be. Within months of their engagement, she was making subtle comments about his humble background and how important it was for him to elevate his social circle. She introduced him to her parents, particularly Linda, who had connections in the medical community and could help advance his career. I watched my son transform. The boy who used to call me every Sunday started calling every other week, then once a month. The son who used to thank me for every sacrifice started taking everything for granted. Sarah would make comments about people who dwell on the past and the importance of looking forward, not backward. The first time Thomas chose Sarah's family over me for Christmas, I told myself it was understandable. They were newlyweds, and Sarah wanted to start their own traditions. When it happened the second year and the third, I realized I was being systematically erased from his life. Now, 25 years after putting that exhausted little boy to bed in our tiny apartment, I'm looking at photos of a man who barely acknowledges my existence. The son I sacrificed everything for just told a room full of people that I don't deserve to be celebrated. I closed the photo album and walked to my bedroom closet. In the back, behind my winter coats, is a small metal box I haven't opened in years. Inside are documents that Thomas has never seen. Papers that tell a story he doesn't know. Papers that might change everything if I ever found the courage to use them. But tonight, I just hold the box and wonder if all those years of sacrifice were worth it. Tomorrow, I'll have to decide what to do with the secret I've been keeping for over 40 years. A secret that could either destroy what's left of my relationship with Thomas, or finally make him understand what real family sacrifice looks like. The metal box has been sitting on my kitchen table for 3 days now, like a sleeping bomb waiting to explode. Every time I walk past it, my heart races a little faster. I've opened it twice, then closed it again, unable to face what's inside. But Thomas's words keep echoing in my head. This old woman doesn't deserve it. Maybe it's time he learned just how much this old woman has been hiding. My father died when Thomas was 12, but not before leaving behind something that would change our lives forever. If I had ever been selfish enough to use it. Dad was a simple man. A mechanic who owned a small auto repair shop, but he was also incredibly smart with money. While everyone else was spending everything they earned, Dad was quietly investing, saving, making deals that no one paid attention to. When he passed, I inherited not just his shop, but a portfolio worth more than I ever imagined possible. Stocks, bonds, real estate investments, and a trust fund that had been growing for decades. The lawyers explained it all to me in terms I barely understood, but the bottom line was clear. Thomas and I would never have to worry about money again. I remember sitting in that lawyer's office, Thomas fidgeting beside me in his school clothes, while Mr. Henderson explained the inheritance. Thomas was more interested in the vending machine in the lobby than in legal documents, but every word burned itself into my memory. The trust is set up specifically for Thomas's benefit, Mr. Henderson had explained, adjusting his glasses as he read from the thick folder. Your father wanted to ensure his grandson's future. The principal amount is substantial, currently valued at approximately $1.2 million, and it's been designed to grow over time. My hands had trembled as I held the documents. $1.2 million. More money than I had ever dreamed of. Enough to quit all my jobs, buy a real house, send Thomas to any college he wanted without loans or sacrifice. However, Mr. Henderson continued, there are conditions. The trust specifies that Thomas can only access the funds when he demonstrates genuine maturity and appreciation for family. Your father was very specific about this. He wanted to ensure that wealth wouldn't corrupt his grandson's character. I looked at 12-year-old Thomas, who was now trying to get quarters for the vending machine, and made a decision that would define the next 30 years of our lives. I asked Mr. Henderson to seal the documents and not mention the inheritance to Thomas until I felt he was ready. Are you certain, Mrs. Patterson? He had asked. This could significantly change your circumstances. I was certain. I wanted Thomas to grow up understanding the value of hard work, the importance of gratitude, the meaning of sacrifice. I wanted him to become a man his grandfather would be proud of, someone who earned his success through character, not just inheritance. So I kept working my multiple jobs. I kept making sacrifices. I kept the secret locked away while Thomas grew up thinking we were just getting by on my wages. Every time I was exhausted, every time money was tight, every time I wanted to quit, I told myself I was building his character. I was making him strong. The trust grew over the years, just as the lawyers had predicted. By the time Thomas graduated high school, it was worth over $2 million. When he finished medical school, it had grown to nearly $3 million. Every year I didn't touch it, every sacrifice I made while that money sat earning interest, was supposed to be an investment in the kind of man Thomas would become. Now, opening the box again, I pull out the most recent statement from the trust management company. The number at the bottom makes my breath catch in my throat. $4.7 million. Nearly $5 million that Thomas has never known existed, growing quietly while I worked myself to exhaustion to support him. But there's another document in the box, one I added myself 5 years ago when I finally accepted what Thomas had become. It's a letter I wrote to the trust administrators, giving them instructions for what should happen if Thomas ever proved himself unworthy of his grandfather's legacy. I unfold the letter now, reading my own words from 5 years ago. If my son Thomas ever demonstrates that he has become the kind of person who would disrespect or abandon family, particularly if he ever treats me as anything less than deserving of love and respect, then I authorize the immediate dissolution of the trust and the donation of all funds to charity. My father intended this money to support a good man, not to reward someone who has forgotten the values our family holds dear. I had written those words after Thomas missed my 65th birthday party, because Sarah wanted to go to Linda's garden party instead. I thought surely that was rock bottom, that things couldn't get worse between us. I was naive. The lawyers had assured me that as the executor of the trust, I had complete authority to make this decision. Thomas would never even know what he had lost, unless I chose to tell him. The money would simply disappear into charitable donations, and the secret would die with me. I sit back in my kitchen chair, staring at these documents that represent a choice I never wanted to make. Part of me still hopes that somehow Thomas will remember who he used to be. The little boy who would hug me tight when I came home from work, who used to say "Thank you, Mama," for everything I did for him. But then I remember his voice from 3 nights ago. This old woman doesn't deserve it. I remember Sarah's laugh, Linda's smug satisfaction, the room full of people watching my humiliation in silence. My phone rings, startling me out of my thoughts. It's an unknown number, but something makes me answer. Mrs. Patterson? This is David Chun from Henderson and Associates. I'm calling about the Patterson Family Trust. My heart stops. What about it? Well, ma'am, we've been managing the trust for quite some time now, and given that the beneficiary is now 42 years old, we wanted to discuss the possibility of disclosure. The trust has grown substantially, and there are some tax implications we should consider. Perhaps it's time to inform Mr. Patterson about his inheritance. I look at the letter in my hands, the one that would end Thomas's chance at this inheritance forever. Actually, Mr. Chun, I think we need to schedule a meeting. There's something important I need to discuss with you about the trust's future. Of course, Mrs. Patterson. When would be convenient for you? Tomorrow, I say, surprising myself with the firmness in my voice. Tomorrow morning first thing. After I hang up, I sit in the silence of my small apartment, surrounded by the weight of 40 years of secrets and sacrifice. Tomorrow, I'll walk into that lawyer's office and make a decision that will change everything. Thomas thinks I'm just an old woman who doesn't deserve celebration. He's about to learn exactly what this old woman has been carrying all these years. The question isn't whether Thomas deserves this inheritance anymore. After 3 nights of reliving his words, I know the answer to that. The question is whether I have the strength to follow through with what needs to be done. I walked into Henderson and Associates at 9 o'clock sharp, carrying the metal box like it contained explosives. In a way it did. David Chun was younger than I expected, probably in his 40s, with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He led me to a conference room that smelled like leather and old money. Mrs. Patterson, thank you for coming in on such short notice. I have to say we've been wondering about this trust for years. It's quite unusual for a beneficiary to remain unaware of such a substantial inheritance for so long. I set the metal box on the polished conference table. There were reasons. Mr. Chun opened a thick file folder. The trust is now valued at $4.7 million, as I'm sure you know from the statements we send you. Your father was remarkably prescient with his investment strategies. But Mrs. Patterson, given Thomas's age and established career, don't you think it's time he knew about this? I took a deep breath. This was the moment I had been dreading and anticipating for 3 days. Mr. Chun, I need to invoke the dissolution clause I added 5 years ago. His pen stopped moving across his notepad. I'm sorry. I want to donate the entire trust to charity. All of it. Today. The silence in the room was deafening. Mr. Chun set down his pen and leaned back in his chair, studying my face carefully. Mrs. Patterson, this is a very significant decision. May I ask what's brought this on? Has something happened with Thomas? The question opened a floodgate I hadn't expected. I found myself telling this stranger about the birthday party, about years of being pushed aside, about watching my son transform from a grateful child into someone who could look me in the eye and declare that I didn't deserve celebration. He doesn't know about the trust at all? Mr. Chun asked when I finished. Not a word. I kept it secret because I wanted him to grow up with good values. I wanted him to understand sacrifice, to appreciate what he had. I thought if he knew about the money, it would make him lazy, entitled. Mr. Chun nodded slowly. And instead, he became those things anyway. Without even knowing about the inheritance, he still turned into someone who takes everything for granted and gives nothing back. I opened the metal box and pulled out my letter from 5 years ago. I wrote this when I first realized what Thomas was becoming. I hoped I'd never have to use it, but after what happened at my birthday party. Mr. Chun read the letter carefully, his expression growing more serious with each line. When he finished, he set it down and looked at me with something that might have been admiration. Mrs. Patterson, legally, you have every right to do this. As the executor, your authority is absolute. But I have to ask, are you certain? This is nearly $5 million we're talking about. Once it's donated, there's no reversing the decision. I'm certain. The words came out stronger than I felt. What I want to know is, can we arrange it so that Thomas finds out what he lost? Mr. Chun raised an eyebrow. You want him to know about the inheritance after it's gone? I want him to understand that his actions have consequences. For 40 years I've protected him from the hard truths of life. I think it's time he learned that treating people badly, especially family, costs more than he imagined. That's certainly possible. We could arrange for the disclosure to happen shortly after the donation is complete. But Mrs. Patterson, you should know that this kind of revelation often causes significant family trauma. Are you prepared for Thomas's reaction? I thought about Thomas's face 3 nights ago, the casual cruelty in his voice when he declared I didn't deserve celebration. I thought about years of being treated like an obligation, of watching him lavish attention and expensive gifts on Sarah's family while treating me like an afterthought. Mr. Chun, the trauma has already happened. I've been living it for years. At least this way, the consequences will match the behavior. He nodded and made a note in his file. What charities would you like to designate? I had already thought about this. Half to the local women's shelter for mothers who are struggling to raise children alone. A quarter to the scholarship fund at the community college where I finally got my degree at 55. And the rest to the senior center where I volunteer. Those are wonderful choices. Your father would be proud. My father specifically wanted this money to go to someone who honored family values. Thomas has made it clear that he doesn't. Mr. Chun began pulling forms from his filing cabinet. This will take a few hours to process properly. Are you sure you don't want to take some time to think about it? Maybe talk to Thomas first, give him a chance to. To what? Apologize. Promise to do better. I shook my head. Mr. Chun, I gave Thomas 42 years to show me who he really is. I finally believe him. As we worked through the paperwork, I felt a strange sense of lightness settling over me. For years, the secret of this inheritance had felt like a burden, a weight I carried every day. The knowledge that I was living in near poverty while sitting on millions of dollars, all in the name of teaching Thomas values he never learned anyway. There's one more thing, I said as Mr. Chun prepared the final documents. When you tell Thomas about the inheritance he's lost, I want you to be very specific about why. I want him to know that his grandfather left this money specifically for someone who would honor family, and that his behavior at my birthday party was the final proof that he wasn't that person. Mrs. Patterson, Mr. Chun said gently, are you prepared for the possibility that this might end your relationship with Thomas permanently? I thought about that for a long moment. Mr. Chun, our relationship ended 3 nights ago when he told a room full of people that I don't deserve to be celebrated. This just makes it official. 2 hours later, the paperwork was complete. The Patterson Family Trust, worth $4.7 million, was dissolved. The money was distributed to 3 charities that would use it to help people who actually needed it, instead of sitting in an account waiting for a man who had proven himself unworthy. When will you contact Thomas? I asked as I gathered my things. We'll give the charities a few days to process the donations, then I'll call him early next week. Would you like me to inform him that you'll be available to discuss this? No, I said, standing up and shouldering my purse. Thomas can call me if he wants to talk, but I won't be waiting by the phone. I've spent 40 years waiting for him to become the man I hoped he could be. I'm done waiting. Walking out of that office, I felt something I hadn't experienced in decades: freedom. The weight of the secret was gone, but more than that, the burden of hope was lifted too. I no longer had to wonder if Thomas would change, if he would somehow become grateful or loving or respectful. I no longer had to carry the fantasy that someday he would appreciate what I had sacrificed for him. The old woman he claimed didn't deserve celebration had just given away nearly $5 million, rather than let him have it. In a few days, he would learn exactly what his words had cost him. And for the first time in years, I was looking forward to his phone call. The call came on a Tuesday morning at 6:47 a.m. I was in my kitchen making coffee when my phone rang with such violence that I nearly dropped the pot. Thomas's name flashed on the screen, and something cold settled in my stomach. He hadn't called me this early since his residency days 20 years ago. I let it ring 4 times before answering. When I finally picked up, the sound that came through the phone wasn't the voice of the successful, arrogant doctor who had humiliated me a week earlier. It was something raw and desperate, barely recognizable. Mom. The word came out like a sob. Mom. Please tell me this is some kind of mistake. I settled into my kitchen chair, wrapping my robe tighter around myself. Good morning, Thomas. What mistake would that be? The lawyer. Henderson and Associates. They called me yesterday about some trust fund. They said there was money, a lot of money, and that it's gone. I took a sip of my coffee, surprised by how calm I felt. Yes, I imagine they did say that. Mom, please. His voice cracked. Please tell me you didn't really give away $5 million. $4.7 million, actually. And yes, I did. The silence on the other end of the line stretched so long I wondered if he'd hung up. Then I heard what sounded like crying deep, shuddering breaths that reminded me of the little boy he used to be when he'd scraped his knee or lost a toy. Why? He whispered finally. Why would you do this to me? The question hit me like a slap. Even now, even after learning what his behavior had cost him, Thomas couldn't see past his own loss. It was still about what had been done to him, not what he had done to deserve it. Thomas, do you remember what you said to me at my birthday party? Mom, I was having a bad day. Work was stressful and Sarah had been. Do you remember what you said? Another long pause. I said some things I shouldn't have. But Mom, $5 million? You threw away $5 million because I hurt your feelings. I had to set my coffee cup down because my hands were starting to shake with rage. Hurt my feelings? Thomas, you told a room full of people that I didn't deserve to be celebrated. You gave an expensive gift to Linda, while declaring that your own mother deserved nothing. You laughed at my humiliation. It wasn't. I didn't mean it like that. How did you mean it, then? Because from where I sat, it seemed like you meant exactly what you said. I could hear him pacing now, his footsteps echoing on what I assumed was the hardwood floor of his expensive house. The house I had helped him buy by co-signing the loan when he was a struggling resident. Mom, listen. I know I've been distant lately. I know I haven't been the best son. But this money, Grandpa left it for me, right? It was supposed to be mine. Your grandfather left it for the kind of man he hoped you would become. Someone who would honor family, who would treat the people who loved him with respect and gratitude. Tell me, Thomas, is that who you've become? Another sob escaped him. I can fix this. I can be better. If you could just call the lawyer back. Explain that it was a misunderstanding. It's gone, Thomas. The charities have already received the funds. There's nothing to fix. Which charities? His voice had taken on a desperate edge. Maybe I could convince them to give it back, make a case that you want to take money away from homeless women and children? From students who can't afford college? From senior citizens who need help? I felt a bitter laugh escape me. That sounds exactly like the man you've become. That's not what I meant. Mom, do you have any idea what Sarah is going to say when she finds out? What Linda's going to think? And there it was. Not remorse for how he'd treated me. Not genuine sorrow for his behavior. Just panic about what his wife and mother-in-law would think. Even in crisis, I wasn't his priority. Is that what you're worried about, Thomas? What Sarah and Linda will think? They're going to blame me. Sarah's already talking about the house renovations we had planned, the vacation to Europe. Linda keeps mentioning how she thought I came from money, how that was part of my appeal as a son-in-law. I felt something cold and final settle in my chest. So let me understand this correctly. You're not calling to apologize for humiliating me. You're not calling because you realized you've been treating me terribly for years. You're calling because you're afraid your wife and her mother won't love you anymore when they find out you're not secretly rich. No, that's not. Mom, please. I'm sorry, okay? I'm sorry about the birthday party. I'm sorry I've been distant. I'm sorry for everything. Can't we fix this? Thomas, what specifically are you sorry for? What do you mean? I mean, what exactly are you apologizing for? What did you do wrong? The pause was telling. I hurt your feelings at the party. What else? I haven't called enough. What else, Thomas? Silence. He literally couldn't think of anything else to apologize for, because he still didn't understand what he'd done wrong. In his mind, this was all an overreaction to one bad night, not the culmination of years of taking me for granted. Thomas, let me ask you something. In the past 5 years, how many times have you called me just to see how I was doing? Not because you needed something, not because it was a holiday, just because you wanted to talk to your mother. More silence. How many times have you invited me to your house for dinner? How many times have you asked about my health, my life, my dreams? Mom, I've been busy. Work is demanding and Sarah needs. Linda needs. Everyone needs something from you except me, right? Because I'm just supposed to exist in the background, grateful for whatever scraps of attention you throw my way. I could hear him crying again, but it sounded different now. Less desperate, more defeated. The lawyer said you told him I didn't deserve the inheritance because I don't honor family values. Is that really what you think of me? Thomas, 3 days ago you stood in front of people and declared that I didn't deserve to be celebrated. A week later you're on the phone crying because you found out what that attitude cost you. So yes, that's exactly what I think of you. I can change. For $5 million, I'm sure you could pretend to change. But Thomas, that money is gone. So the question is, can you change for nothing? Can you become a better son simply because it's the right thing to do? The phone went quiet except for his ragged breathing. I need to go, he said finally. Sarah's calling me. Of course she was. Even now, in the middle of this conversation, Sarah took priority. Thomas, before you hang up, I want you to understand something. That money sat in an account for 30 years while I worked multiple jobs to support you. I could have used it at any time to make both our lives easier. I didn't, because I wanted you to grow up understanding the value of hard work and family sacrifice. I wanted you to become a man worthy of your grandfather's legacy. And instead, you became someone who thinks his mother doesn't deserve celebration, while his mother-in-law deserves diamond bracelets. He hung up without saying goodbye. I sat in my kitchen holding the silent phone, feeling strangely peaceful. The conversation had gone exactly as I'd expected. Thomas was sorry he'd lost the money, but he still wasn't sorry for who he'd become. 20 minutes later my phone buzzed with a text message. This isn't over. Sarah says there has to be a way to get the money back. We're calling a lawyer. I turned off my phone and finished my coffee. Let them call all the lawyers they wanted. The money was gone, legally and permanently donated to people who would actually appreciate it. But more importantly, Thomas had just proven once again that he was exactly the person I thought he was. The old woman who didn't deserve celebration had just taught him the most expensive lesson of his life. 6 months have passed since that phone call, and I'm sitting in the garden behind Mercy House Women's Shelter, watching children play on the new playground equipment that was purchased with part of my father's trust. Their laughter fills the air, pure, uncomplicated joy that reminds me what happiness actually sounds like. The fallout was swift and brutal, though not for me. Within a week of learning about the lost inheritance, Sarah had filed for divorce. I heard about it through Martha, my neighbor, whose sister works at the courthouse. Apparently, Sarah had been quite vocal about her reasons. She hadn't signed up to be married to someone from a poor family, and she couldn't trust Thomas anymore since he'd lied about his financial prospects. The irony wasn't lost on me. Sarah was leaving Thomas for the same reason she'd helped turn him against me, because she thought he wasn't wealthy enough to deserve her attention. Linda, of course, disappeared from Thomas's life immediately. The woman who had been like a second mother to him suddenly had no time for phone calls or dinner invitations. Without the promise of financial gain, her maternal feelings evaporated completely. Thomas tried calling me several more times in those first few weeks. The conversations followed the same pattern. Anger, bargaining, pleading, then more anger when I refused to feel guilty about my decision. He threatened to sue me, though his lawyer quickly explained that the trust had been legally dissolved, and there was no grounds for any legal action. The last time we spoke was 2 months ago. He'd called from a different number, probably hoping I wouldn't recognize it and would pick up. His voice was different then, smaller somehow. "Mom, I lost my job. I had been watering my plants when the phone rang." I set down the watering can and sat in my favorite chair by the window. "What happened?" "The hospital restructured. They said they were eliminating my position, but I think Linda had something to do with it. Her husband sits on the board." For a moment, I felt a flicker of the old sympathy. This was my son struggling and alone. Then I remembered where this struggle had come from. "I'm sorry to hear that, Thomas. I can't afford the house payments. Sarah's lawyers are demanding spousal support. I don't know what I'm going to do." I waited for him to ask the question we both knew was coming. "Mom, I know things have been difficult between us, but I wondered if, you must have some savings, right? You worked all those years, and now that the trust money went to charity, maybe you could." "Maybe I could what, Thomas?" "Help me. Just until I get back on my feet." And there it was. Even after everything, even after learning that he'd lost millions of dollars because of how he'd treated me, Thomas still thought he could call and ask for money. He still thought his mother existed to solve his problems. "Thomas, do you remember what you said to me at my 70th birthday party?" "Mom, please don't. You said I didn't deserve to be celebrated. You gave Linda an expensive gift while declaring that your own mother deserved nothing. And now you want me to give you money." That was different. I was angry about work stuff, and Sarah had been pressuring me. "It wasn't different, Thomas. It was exactly who you are. And who you are is someone who only thinks about me when you need something. I'm your son." "Yes, you are. And I'm your mother. The mother you publicly humiliated. The mother you've ignored for years unless you needed something. The mother who worked herself to exhaustion to give you every opportunity, while you gave all your gratitude to someone else's family." The silence stretched between us like a canyon. "So that's it," he said finally. "You're just going to let me lose everything. Thomas, you lost everything the moment you decided I wasn't worth your respect. I just made sure there were consequences for that choice." He hung up, and I haven't heard from him since. I'd be lying if I said it didn't hurt. There are moments, usually late at night, when I wonder if I was too harsh. When I think about that little boy who used to hug me so tight when I came home from work, who used to say "Thank you, Mama," for every small kindness. But then I remember that little boy grew up to be a man who could look me in the eye and declare that I didn't deserve celebration. And I remember that some lessons can only be learned through consequences. I volunteer at Mercy House 3 days a week now. I help women who are trying to rebuild their lives after leaving abusive relationships, women who are working multiple jobs to support their children, women who understand what sacrifice actually means. They remind me every day that family isn't about blood, it's about respect, support, and genuine care for each other's well-being. Maria, one of the residents, is about Thomas's age. She's studying to be a nurse while working nights as a cleaner and raising 2 young daughters. Last week, she hugged me after I helped her with her homework and said, "Miss Judith, I hope when I'm your age, I'm half as strong as you are." That hug meant more to me than anything Thomas had said to me in years. The scholarship fund at the community college has already awarded its first grants. I went to the ceremony last month and watched 18 students receive funding for their education. Most of them were older students, people who were going back to school after raising families or surviving hardships. Their gratitude was overwhelming, not performative or obligated, but genuine appreciation for an opportunity they never expected to receive. The Senior Center used their portion of the donation to expand their meal program and create a transportation service for elderly residents who can't drive anymore. I see the difference it makes every day when I volunteer there. People who were isolated and struggling now have community, support, connection. My father's money is doing exactly what he hoped it would do, supporting people who understand the value of family, community, and mutual care. It's just not supporting the family member he originally intended. I live differently now too. Not extravagantly but comfortably. I bought a small house with a garden, something I'd always dreamed of but never thought I could afford. I take art classes at the community center. I travel occasionally, nothing fancy, just bus trips to places I've always wanted to see. Most importantly, I sleep peacefully at night. For 40 years, I carried the weight of that secret inheritance, the burden of trying to shape Thomas into someone worthy of it. Now that weight is gone, and so is the constant disappointment of watching him fail to become the man I'd hoped he could be. Last week, I got a letter from Thomas. Not a phone call this time, but an actual letter, handwritten on plain paper. It was short. "Mom, I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I wanted you to know that I'm working as an emergency room doctor at a county hospital now. The pay isn't great, but I'm helping people who really need it. I'm also going to counseling to try to understand how I became someone who could treat you the way I did. I don't expect forgiveness, and I'm not asking for money. I just wanted you to know that I'm trying to become a better person, even though it's probably too late. I love you." I read that letter 3 times, then put it in my kitchen drawer. I haven't responded yet, and I may never respond. But for the first time in years, Thomas had written to me without asking for anything. For the first time, he'd acknowledged that his behavior was wrong without making excuses or blaming other people. Maybe he's finally learning the lesson I spent 40 years trying to teach him. Maybe losing everything was what he needed to understand what really matters. Or maybe this is just another manipulation, another attempt to get back into my good graces. Either way, it doesn't matter anymore. I'm not holding my breath waiting for Thomas to change. I'm not arranging my life around his potential for growth. I'm not carrying the hope that someday he'll become the son I wanted him to be. Instead, I'm living my own life, surrounded by people who appreciate me for who I am, not what I can give them. I'm using my remaining years to help others, to pursue interests I never had time for, to finally put myself first after decades of putting everyone else's needs ahead of my own. The old woman who didn't deserve celebration has finally learned to celebrate herself. And that, I think, is the best ending I could have asked for.